This is Mr. West, Ross's Mustache. Welcome to this dirt video for the Year 8 assessment on Lions Led by Donkeys and whether we agree with the interpretation provided here by Gary Sheffield or whether we don't, and whether the sources agree or disagree with the interpretation that's provided here. Let's have a look then. Okay, so this is the running order. So let's have a quick look at this now and see where you're going to go. Obviously, if you've got dark green and pink, you know your videos towards the end of the video, and black and blue are early doors. So just have a quick look at that, see the running order, and then let's get into it. Okay, so throughout your answer, you should try and quote the interpretation that you've seen there. Okay, so you should try and quote the interpretation that you've got, all right, and refer to it in your answer. So what I've done is I've picked out 3 quotes here that are things you could use in your answer. Now, these should be maybe at the beginning. A lot of you are pretty good at putting it at the beginning, but then should also be throughout your answer. You'll see actually later on how I've managed to refer back to these in my other slides. So if we look at the argument then, we'd say that Haig's strategy was fundamentally correct. Remember, we talked about the word fundamentally and the idea that actually if something is fundamentally correct, it's largely correct. He's not saying Haig was perfect, but he's saying that his strategy and what he was doing was essentially correct, okay? And that's important. So try and get that into your answer, that he's saying that Haig's strategy is basically right, okay? And also he's talked about a stepping stone to the victories of 1918. Remember, without a stepping stone, you can't get to the other side. And in this case, the other side is victory. So if you just step into the river or whatever it is, you'd get washed away. So with a stepping stone there, and that's what the Somme is, it's a stepping stone that you step on to then move to the other side. So again, can you mention that? And by no means all bad. Okay, so patchy, but no means all bad. So patchy means that actually at times maybe things didn't go as well, but by no means all bad. And I wonder if that's a reference, this yellow bit here, to the first day of the Somme versus the rest of the battle, okay? In that, on the first day, Haig's performance, according to this interpretation, was patchy, but the whole battle, it was by no means all bad. So have a look back at your answer. If you've got this target, try and get these 3 quotes into your answer somewhere in green pen. Okay, so now we're on to blue, and using evidence from the sources to back up your points to the strength of the interpretation. So what I've done is I've picked 3 sources here, E, F and G, okay? And the first one is this one here, which is the picture of the dugout that's been destroyed. And I've used some keywords here. The first day of the Somme was preceded by a 7-day artillery bombardment, which was supposed to destroy the German trenches and dugouts. Source E shows that in some cases the bombardment was a success, all right? So if you've not mentioned source E, can you get that in? And can you link it back to the bombardment that preceded the offensive on the first day? And try and use the word bombardment and dugouts if you've got that source. Similarly, with source F, okay, Haig believed the attack on the Somme was part of a policy of attrition. That's the idea of wearing the enemy down, okay, over time. So if you wear the enemy down, if you keep killing and injuring them, then eventually they'll give up, all right? You won't necessarily win by taking lots of land, like in other conflicts, but you'll wear them down and become victorious in the end. And also you could link it to Verdun, couldn't you? The fact that fighting 2 major battles meant the Germans would struggle to find enough men. So again, trying to use that source to link to attrition and Verdun. So if you look at your source F, if you've used it, have you used the word attrition and Verdun? If you haven't used it, let's get that in. And then finally, we've got Ludendorff here, the German general, and he says that the source explains the German losses on the Somme, which were heavy, leaving the Germans exhausted. This source is focused on the later stages of the Battle of the Somme, such as the Battle of Flers-Courcelette and Morval, where Haig's army was much more successful, agreeing with the idea that it was a stepping stone to victory. So again, what I've done here is I've used the source G, but I've also been able to use the quote from the interpretation and link it to the source. So have a look back if you've got blue and try and use at least 2 of these in your answer. Okay, so red is about using sources to back up the points on the weaknesses of the interpretation. So these are sources that disagree with what the interpretation is saying. Remember, interpretation 1 by Gary Sheffield gave the impression that Haig's tactics were essentially good and it was a stepping stone to victory. So source B makes Haig and the generals seem out of touch with reality. That's what I've phrased it there. He says you're going to walk over the top with walking sticks, all the Germans will be dead, not even a rat will have survived. But actually, 57,000 British soldiers were killed or injured on the first day. The vast majority of Germans had survived the bombardment, and maybe this is an example of how on occasion he was led down by senior subordinates. So it isn't Haig who says this to the troops, although he probably instructed them to say it, but maybe they could have phrased it better. So that links into a quote from the source, okay? But yeah, basically, they didn't walk over, did they? Huge numbers were killed on the first day, and that proves that actually Haig's tactics weren't as successful as the interpretation maybe makes out. Moving on to source D, it highlights on the first day some regiments were almost wiped out without making any real progress. This challenges the interpretation because Haig's strategy was fundamentally correct. If that was the case, would so many soldiers have died? Obviously the answer to that is no. So try and bring that in, and can you see I've quoted the interpretation as well to link it in. Finally, source L, I've put it makes Haig seem foolish. Some people use words like dumb, not really academic enough. I think something like foolish would be better. Out of touch with the developments in technology. Aeroplanes and tanks were relied upon in future conflicts. The source agrees with lines led by Doncrease and disagrees with Gary Sheffield's interpretation. All right, so there's 3 sources for the red. Have a look at them. Try and make sure you've got at least 2 of them in your answer, or add 2 if you haven't. Okay, so light green is the strengths and weaknesses of the sources by checking them against your own knowledge. So I've picked a couple out here, source E and D. Source C is obviously about the bombardment, and it's talking about the fact that German dugouts were destroyed. Well, 3 German strongholds were taken on the first day, which would agree with the source that you can see there, because it shows a German, one of the German defences been destroyed. But this source gives the impression that a lot of German dugouts were destroyed like this one. Actually, many German dugouts were mined into the chalk, and most Germans survived the bombardment. That's how they were able to inflict so many casualties on the first day. Source D as well. Oh, so going back to that, so you can see I've used the green and the red, so I've done both sides of it, okay? So if you've got light green, try and include both sides in your answer. Source D highlights the number of deaths in one regiment on the first day of the Somme. The figures in the source are undoubtedly accurate, and they reflect a wider truth that loads of British soldiers were killed on the first day or injured. Yeah, it should say killed or injured there, not just killed, okay? That said, the source is a little misleading. It gives the impression, it says no Germans were killed, but actually on the first day 10 to 12,000 were killed or injured. So you can see there that it's perhaps, I think, largely correct. The figures in the source will be correct, but perhaps a little bit misleading when it says that no Germans were killed. So you've got light green, look back at where you've used these sources, or if you haven't used them, and make sure you're getting both sides, strengths and weaknesses of the different sources, okay? Okay, so dark green, the strengths and weaknesses of the source against the provenance. Now the provenance means who is it who said it? Where has the source come from? Now it might be that you have got this target and you've actually mentioned about where the source came from, but perhaps you've not mentioned it in the way that we want to look to. So this is about probably developing what you've already said. If you haven't written anything, of course, then you can have a look at it. I think for source F then, a lot of you will have said that Haig was obviously in charge and therefore he wanted to make himself look good. I don't disagree with that, but try and think of this angle, that he wants to justify the casualties. It's not like he can say halfway through the Somme or at the end of the battle, he can't say after 2 weeks of the battle that we've taken so much land that it's been worth it. He can't say that. So he's got to look at another way of seeing this battle as being worth it really to the British people, the people who are criticising him. So he can't, you talk about the amount of land taken because he didn't take enough land. So he had to find another way to justify the losses. And that does affect the reliability of the source. It means we can't always trust its accuracy because Haig has a vested interest in promoting this opinion. He maybe will have exaggerated it. Similarly, on the other side of the argument is source G, written by German General Ludendorff, okay? He may have been criticised for leading German army to defeat. He therefore looked to deflect the blame away from himself and sort of move it onto something he couldn't control. So he might say, well, actually, the Somme, we were exhausted afterwards and there's no way we could win the war after that. Well, actually, that's quite a good, clever thing for him to say because it stops people blaming him and his tactics for it, okay? And he may have exaggerated how exhausted they were, and that affects the reliability of it. So again, have a look at what's there. For source F, think about justifying the casualties. And for source G, think about deflecting the blame away from himself. Okay, so the conclusion here comes into 2 parts, okay? First of all, you should say whether you largely agree or disagree with the interpretation. Remember, Gary Sheffield's talked about the fact that he largely thinks Haig did a pretty good job. There were some errors in there, but a pretty good job. Do you agree or disagree with that? Remember, This is about lions led by donkeys. So people who would agree with Gary Sheffield would look at the whole battle, okay, from the beginning to the end. Whereas those who disagree would focus more on the first day. So where does your opinion lie? Do you think you want to just look at the first day or look at the whole battle? And I think both sides have got valid arguments. But maybe if you agree with him, you're going to look at the kind of the whole battle. If you disagree, you're going to look more at the first day. Having said that then, do the sources agree or disagree with him, okay? So with this is a conclusion, remember, so you should have written about some of the sources in your answer. Do they largely agree? Now, we know there was 3 that agree and 3 that disagree. But just generally, when you look at the sources, are they painting Haig in a positive way or a negative way? And I would suggest to you, looking at there's quite a few that are quite negative towards Haig. So I would say the sources largely probably disagree with Gary Sheffield's interpretation. And again, you maybe want to engage with that, okay? And perhaps they kind of paint a picture of Haig as being a bit foolish, or someone who doesn't know what he's doing, outmoded, out-of-date ideas, maybe someone who's a bit callous, who doesn't care about the losses. So you can maybe bring those in, all right? So let's say, have a look, get your green pen done.